Welcome to this breathwork class, guys. This is called the essential breath, and by that what I mean is the breath that is natural to all of us, that is innate in all of us. The free, easy, natural breath that we all breathed as children before modern life kind of layered on tension within our body and the breath became restricted. So this practice is really an undoing of the tension that layers on top of the breath and that withholds the breath. So it's an uncovering of what is already there, which is the essential breath. So we're going to start with a few gentle stretches to help us open the parts of the body that are crucial for feeling a nice full and easy breath. So what I'm using for practice is just my mat, a blanket, and if you have it, a strap, but not to worry if you haven't got a strap with you, you can do this without. So we're going to start in child's pose, balasana. So let's bring the big toes to touch, knees slightly apart, and then go ahead and extend your arms forward and bring the forehead to rest on the ground if you can. And I'm going to stay slightly more active in child's pose here, with the elbows lifted slightly off the ground, spreading through the fingers, grounding the palms. And as I ground my palms, I want to shift the pelvis and the sitting bones back toward the heels, as long as the knees allow you to do that. And then begin to take a couple of slightly deeper breaths and invite your inhalation to open back, to expand back into the back ribs, into the space around the lower back, even as far down as the tailbone. So each inhalation invites this opening of the back body, and each exhalation invites a softening and perhaps a length from fingertips to sitting bones. Very good. From here, lift the head slightly away from the ground and then walk your arms over diagonally toward the left hand side and slightly adjust your belly and rib cage over the left thigh and knee before you then bring the head back down. The head may not reach the ground now, and that's okay, but let the neck be relaxed. And then see if you might crawl your right fingertips a bit further over to the left hand side and draw your right sitting bone back toward the heel, turning the right side rib cage downward toward your mat a little, and then breathing into the side rib cage and stretching the intercostal muscles between the side rib cage, so that as you inhale, you feel that the space between the ribs on the right side becomes greater, and then as you exhale, slightly less. And then you can come back to the middle, go over to the other side, guys, arms reaching over to the right hand side, adjusting the belly and rib cage, left arm reaching across. I'm kind of meeting a wall here, and that's not too much of an issue because I'm really focusing on the left arm reaching across rather than the right arm. And then release the head, the neck, turn the left rib cage down toward the ground and extend the sitting bone back toward the heel. Breathe into the left side rib cage, gently stretching the intercostal muscles between the ribs. Very good. And then slowly coming back to center and walking your way up to sit. We're going to come into a cross-legged position briefly here. Do feel free to sit on something if that's helpful to raise your pelvis. You're going to bring one shin in front of the other, crossing at the mid-shins. And then we're going to take the left hand to the right knee and right fingertips behind the back for a twist. So take a breath in, sit tall, but gently ground the tailbone and sitting bones down. And as you exhale, gently turning the rib cage, the chest and the shoulder girdle to the right hand side. Just releasing any tension around the rib cage or the mid upper back to invite a slightly deeper breath. Exhale to release, guys, come back to face the front. Change the cross of your legs. And then take your right hand to your left knee, left fingertips behind the back. Breathing in to sit tall without coming into too much of a lower back curve or arch. And then exhaling, bending both elbows very lightly to help turn through the rib cage, through the chest, keeping the collarbones wide as you turn the shoulder girdle. Maybe the head turns slightly, but not worrying too much about that. Deep breathing into the rib cage. And then on an exhale, you can release. Very good. Finally, we're going to take our feet in front. So we're going to uncross our legs, feet move in front, knees bent. And then take the hands behind you, about a foot or so, maybe half a foot. Turn the hands outwards slightly. Notice that my fingers are actually pointing toward the front of my mat, but hands slightly outwardly turned. And then I'm going to bend the elbows a little, leaning back. Squeeze the elbows in toward each other. Feel the collarbones widen and the shoulder blades narrow. They come close together on the back. And then push into the hands, straighten through the elbows and begin to lift the breastbone toward the ceiling. So really nice, proud chest. You can stay here, but if you want to take it slightly further, on an inhale, ground the hands and feet and lift the pelvis to any degree that you can, guys, coming into tabletop position. Just for a breath or so, and then you can come back down. Very good. Okay, now from here, we're going to come to lie down. So I'm going to shift my blanket in as a headrest, so you want to have your blanket or cushion there. If you have a strap, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make a loop in the strap. So first of all, I'm just making sure there's no twists or turns in it. And then I'm going to loop the strap through both of the D-rings, pulling it through a little bit. And then take it back over the first D-ring that you encounter there and through the second one. Thread it through, and then you should get nice tight buckle there. Now, slightly larger loop. I'm going to bring the feet through and slide the strap up to about the mid-thigh. And then I'm going to tighten the strap just enough that it holds my outer thighs hip distance. So my legs are hip width and the strap is going to support the outer thighs. The buckle is in between the gap of the legs, okay? Loose end of the strap out of the way, and then I'm going to lie back, keeping my knees bent, feet on the ground. So we're in effortless rest pose. So from here, I'm going to just slide the blanket in so it's just touching the tops of my shoulders. Head and neck are supported. And then feet about hip distance apart. The nice thing about having the strap here for support is that your legs can just rest out into the strap and really let go and release. If you're not using the strap, what you can do instead is take your feet wider, maybe mat distance, angle the toes in and bring the knees together, okay? Let's take the arms out to our sides, slightly away from the body. Palms facing up toward the ceiling. And then what I'm going to do is adjust my shoulder blades slightly down the back and broaden them outward away from the spine. And then to follow that, I'm going to lift the back of my pelvis, smooth the back of the pelvis forward, lengthening the tailbone, and then settle back down. Finally, what you can do here is take your hands to the back of your head without lifting the shoulders. But I'm going to cup the back of the head, the base of the skull. My thumbs are coming down on the insides of my ears here, if you can see. And I'm going to let the weight of the head release into the hands. And then I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to attempt to pull very gently from the base of the skull toward the back of the mat. So I'm lengthening the back of the neck, and it does actually feel quite nice. And then you can allow the hands to slide out once you get a nice sense of length through the back of the neck. Make sure you haven't pulled your own hair. And then release the arms back down. Okay. Just take a moment here to invite the body to soften and allow yourself to settle on your mat. And perhaps just placing a light awareness on the breath, very gently, very naturally flowing in and out of the body. And begin by inviting the face to relax. Notice first the space across the forehead and in between the eyebrows and around the eyes. And allow those spaces to become soft and slack. And then release the temples, the cheekbones, the cheeks. And release the jaw. Allow the bottom jaw to hang loose, separating the back teeth, softening the tongue and the whole interior space of the mouth. And then move your attention down toward your collarbones and your shoulders. Invite the shoulders to soften and release down toward your mat. And when we actually look at the anatomy of the lungs, what many of us don't realise is that the top apex of the lungs actually comes all the way up and sits just behind the collarbones. So it's a lot higher than we might perceive. So as you breathe in, quite naturally, just sense if you can feel how the collarbones very gently broaden, become wider. And then as you breathe out, sense how the collarbones very slightly narrow. You might notice the same really small movement through the shoulders. So as the breath comes in, the shoulders very gently broaden and move slightly further away from each other and perhaps closer to the ground. And as you breathe out, the shoulders very slightly narrow with the collarbones. Move your attention down a little to the rib cage and the chest. And as you breathe in, try to sense what movement you can feel through the rib cage. Do you feel the breath expanding into the front rib cage and projecting upward toward the ceiling? Do you perceive more of an outward expansion into the side rib cage, or perhaps a broadening back into the back rib cage? And then as you continue to breathe, see if you can invite all sides of the rib cage to equally expand with the breath. So as we breathe in, the front ribs expand forward, the side ribs move outward, the back ribs broaden back into the floor. And play with that for a few cycles of your breath. And then move your attention to the lowest part of the rib cage, where the diaphragm sits, the respiratory diaphragm. Now this is a dome-shaped muscle that sits in the lowest concave of the ribs and attaches to the side ribs. And as we breathe in, the diaphragm broadens outward and it flattens downward toward the stomach. As we exhale, the diaphragm softly retracts inward and domes upward toward the heart. So just see if you can sense any movement around the lower ribs. As you breathe in, perhaps you sense an outward movement, a broadening action. And as you exhale, perhaps you sense that drawing back in and softening. Notice any holding or gripping in that area. And see if you can invite a softening so that you can really fully articulate the breath through the diaphragm. Moving the attention even further down to the abdomen or the belly. And start to notice how the belly moves as you breathe. Noticing how there's a swelling or expanding on the inhalation, and then a settling and a softening on the exhalation. Now, we often hold tension in the belly, and we often try to hold the belly in and keep it tight and taut. So here, try to allow a softness so that as you breathe in, the belly can softly and freely expand upward, outward, and into the back. And as you exhale, feel the belly softening back down and in, softly hollowing back toward the spine. And to feel the belly's movement a bit more, we can invite the breath to flow more deeply down into the torso. So as you take your next breath in, perhaps invite the breath further down. Feel the belly softly opening and swelling with the in-breath, and then releasing and softening with the out-breath. Moving our attention even further down toward the base of our pelvis, the pelvic floor. So the muscle from the pubic bone at the front to the tailbone at the back, and from one sitting bone to the other across. See if you can consciously release that space, soften and release tension in that space. And see what you experience there with your breath. So as you inhale the breath down, perhaps you sense an opening or a broadening of the pelvic floor. And as you exhale and release, perhaps a condensing or toning of the pelvic floor. And then move your attention to the back of the pelvis now, to the back of the pelvis, the sacrum. And see if you can sense the very subtle rocking action to and fro of the pelvis as you breathe. So you may sense that as you inhale, the pelvis rocks very slightly forward and the lower back moves away from the ground. And then as you exhale, the pelvis gently rocks backward and the lower back flattens or lengthens into the ground. And finally, we're going to expand our awareness to hold the whole body within it, to sense how the body moves as a whole as we breathe. So feeling the gentle broadening and narrowing of the collarbones, the expanding upward, outward and into the back of the rib cage, the broadening action of the diaphragm on the inhale and then soft retracting on the exhale, the swelling and settling of the belly, the broadening and condensing of the pelvic floor, and the gentle rocking of the pelvis. The more we revisit this practice, the more attentive and perhaps attuned we'll become to the subtler sensations of the body and of the breath. And we can begin to undo some of the tension that perhaps restricts our breathing and become aware of the habitual patterns that we've fallen into by no fault of our own that restrict the breath. So you can stay here as long as you wish. If you would like to come out with me, you can begin to move the fingers, move the toes a little. And then draw the knees in toward the chest, sliding the strap off if you have it, giving yourself a bit of a squeeze in. And then rolling off to the side, keeping the eyes closed if you can, coming up to sit very slowly, bringing the head up carefully. And then bringing the palms together to touch. Bowing the head forward. Just taking a moment to honour your practice. Lifting the gaze from here, opening the eyes. Namaste.